observations you could make
Me and you.
for evolution.
One. The best one that you think supports that it's a theory, the best observation you got.
The fossil record and genetics.
Okay, I observed a fossil or a collection of fossil, right? So the observation is fossils, plural, okay? Is the question what causes fossils, plural?
What?
I'm
Let me
asking you, if you found
really,
fossils, what's the observation?
really quick. We don't. So the fossil record was used to build support for evolution, but then there are fossils that were predicted to be out there that we then found. So the fossils are not just observations, and then we form a
Okay,
theory around the observations.
excuse me,
The
hold on
fossils
a second.
are
Hold
the
on a second.
evidence that was
Stop
predicted as well.
for a second.
Hmm.
You just said we use fossils to support the theory.
Hmm.
You didn't even get to the theory because you need an observation to get to the theory first. So you're starting with the
Hmm.
theory and then you're finding fossils. You
Hmm.
have to do it the proper scientific way, which is start with an observation. You don't assume the theory because you didn't get there yet. You have to start with the observation, not tie an observation to your assumed theory. This is not science, this is pseudoscience. So again, if you're going to claim that you found fossils, is there something specific about the fossils you're calling your observation?
Yeah, the characteristics of the fossils. So, for example, Archaeopteryx was predicted to have existed before its fossil was ever found. It should have intermediate traits between theropod dinosaurs and birds, and it does.
Okay, hold on. Again, you're telling a story about the observation. In science, you start with an observation just purely and describe it. Okay. So,
Yeah.
what are you purely observing with fossils, please? Very clearly.
The anatomical structure is the most obvious thing you can observe with fossils. And then by observing the anatomical structure of modern living birds and extinct theropod dinosaurs, the prediction that an intermediate fossil form should exist was made, and then it was discovered.
Hold on. We're not talking about predictions. We're starting with.
I wonder what these fossils were, because he's saying they found fossils and then they predicted what they're going to evolve to, I guess, and then they found new fossils which fit the prediction. But I mean, even so, does that mean like the new fossils they found, like how did they examine that the new fossils they found that they predicted matched that they were descendants or lineage of those previous fossils? Like how did they go about testing that? I would have liked to have known that.
The scientific method. This should be very easy for you. Now, focus.
It is.
The observation is
It
the
is.
fossil exists and it shows the phenotype, the anatomy of a certain bird-like creature, and you're comparing that to an observation you have presently with an anatomical similar bird-like creature, correct? That's the observation.
No, I said theropod dinosaurs and modern
Okay.
birds. So what
Okay.
was go ahead.
I'm just saying, in clear language, you're discovering a fossil and you're looking at its anatomy and you're comparing it to modern anatomy, right? In short, that's your observation.
Yes, because what evolution tells us is that the organisms of today are the
Dude,
descendants of
stop.
organisms of the past.
Stop going to the
I'm
theory. I'm asking stop it.
I'm
asking
telling you
to
the
get to
scientific
dude,
steps.
you can't interpret the observation with the theory because the theory is at the tail end of the theory. You have to pretend you don't know what the theory is.
I'm talking Archaeopteryx was discovered only a few years after On the Origin of Species was published.
I don't
so
care about the story.
evolution was very much hypothetical at the time, and I'm telling you what happened when it was very
you can't
hypothetical.
even get to the
before
you
genetics,
can't even get past
before the
observation.
modern synthesis,
Let me ask
before
you.
any
No,
of that
stop your
stuff.
story. Stop the filibustering storytelling. I don't care about your stories. Observation. There is a fossil that has an anatomy. There is a current animal
Peterson losing it
today that
already.
has similar anatomy, right? All I'm asking you is that the observation?
That's one of the observations, yeah.
Okay, let's start with that.
Yeah.
Thank you. That was really hard. Observation. Old thing has traits, typical traits, anatomy. Current thing has similar things, right? The next question in the scientific method is what causes the similarity, right? That's your question.
I never asked a question. What are you talking about?
I know because you didn't do the scientific method. Thank you. So
He didn't say that you were asking a question. He was just saying, well, if you observe these things, then the question you would ask is what caused it. That's what he was saying, that's the question that you would ask.
So the next question in the scientific method, Peterson, is you start with the observation, and now you're asking a question about the observation in nature, the similarities between these two things. So isn't the question what causes the similarities between these things?
Yeah, and then that would be genetics,
Okay.
which was discovered farther down the road.
Hold on a second.
What is
If the
going on?
question is what causes this phenomenon you call similarity in traits or anatomy, right? Your hypothesis is now this: what causes similarity, correct?
A hypothesis is not a question.
The hypothesis is positing X causes Y, correct?
Yeah.
Okay. So what is X in this scientific method? We got to the observation, we asked the question, what causes the similarities, right? You have fossils, and that's your observation, right? A fossil and the current bird that you're referring to. Hypothesis is X causes Y. So what is X?
You could say common descent. You could also say genetics.
Question big.
No, it's
Isn't
not.
common descent to the theory itself?
It's an implication of the theory, yes, but we would look at
So you can't.
at any.
Stop.
Go ahead.
Common descent is a post-diction, um, um, basically story of what is occurring. We're asking for something that's X that you could introduce to produce similarities between these two things, right? The phenomenon is similarities in phenotype, right? So now we're asking a question: what causes similarities in phenotype? And you've skipped to common descent, which you can't introduce into an experiment. You can't introduce common descent and remove it. This is not science.
What? We do evolutionary. We do evolutionary experiments all the time.
I didn't ask if you think we do evolutionary experiments.
I don't think we do. We do.
I'm trying to. I don't care what you think we do right now.
I don't think that we do. We do. Like I can cite you some.
I don't care if we do right now. We're supposed to be doing one right now, dude. And the observation is similarity in phenotype between an old thing and a new thing. Question: what causes the similarity?
Common descent.
Hypothesis: common descent. So is common descent something you can introduce into an experiment?
Digging up fossils really isn't an experiment, but that doesn't make it not scientific.
That doesn't answer my question. This is cross-examination.
I'm pointing out the red herring of.
No, a red herring. You said X causes Y. Okay, is it correct that you're saying X equals common descent, Y is similarity between these two things?
I'd have to write that down to keep track of it. What I'm telling you is that the reason the Archaeopteryx transitional form exists is because theropod dinosaurs are the common ancestor of Archaeopteryx and modern.
That's begging the question, dude.
It's not begging the question.
Yes, listen, I'm going to ask you more.
You need to answer my questions
now.
This is the kind of evidence we would predict. It was found.
I'm not asking for
supporting evidence of X.
Stop it. Peterson, stop. This is my cross-examination.
I know.
Observation. We'll do this real slow. Observation. There's an old thing that shares anatomy with a current thing. I ask a question. What causes the similarity? Your hypothesis is
that common descent causes
it.
Dude, and then we found the evidence that confirms
Hold on.
Just keep the interrupting to minimum, please.
Stop it. Okay. You posit that a thing called common descent is the independent variable that causes similar anatomy, correct?
There's no independent variable.
I'm asking a question.
And your question is flawed, which is why I'm informing you that doing paleontology doesn't have independent variables because it's not an experiment.
Therefore, it's not science.
That's complete bullshit.
You can see it. Dude, does a scientific
There are all kinds of things.
I'm asking the questions.
I'm answering your question.
No, you're not. Listen, you just said it. You conceded the debate right now. Why?
No, I didn't. You fucking moron. It doesn't. You don't. No.
Can you develop a scientific theory without an experiment?
Absolutely.
You can. Okay, so what's the need? Why use experiments then if you could just develop theories without experiments?
Because they help.
They help? Okay,
yeah,
so I can just develop any theory without an experiment and you just believe it because I don't have an experiment to be the arbiter of two competing hypotheses.
There's more.
Over.
You literally started, we're actually doing this earlier. There's other kinds of evidence, like just mere observations, than experimental evidence. But that doesn't mean that it
What?
can't be part of
Observations
science.
is the first step, dude. I didn't say it's not.
Yeah, I mean, Jimbob's right there. It's just like, well, wait a minute. So, see, the thing that bugs me is that these people, and like, I'm assuming, I don't know, Planet Peterson is, a lefty or whatnot. I'm going to assume that he's probably at most, at best, that he's at least center left. But the thing is that like we come up with like our own theories and stuff all the time, right? And they always like yell at us and like, well, that's not proven. You have to look at the science. The scientists haven't proven it yet. They always appeal to the scientist's theory, but then when Planet Peterson comes here and says, well, you don't have to have an experiment in order to confirm the theory or not, it's like, well, then, like, why the hell are you always like, like, why are like people like always yelling at us and like, like talking condescendingly to us, like if we're morons, if that's the case? And why are you guys always appealing to some kind of authority with the scientists then?
Part of science. I said observation is the first step. Now tell me, how do you arbitrate between two competing viable hypotheses without an experiment?
You can look for evidence, like let's say I think that George Washington was actually a woman, and somebody else says I think he was a man. We
That's
go
not a
and
scientific
dig
question.
up his bones, and we
It's not
find
even a scientific theory, dude. A scientific theory. We're talking scientific theory.
we're talking about how do you delineate
look.
information absent an experiment. It can be
No.
done. I
didn't
just
ask
demonstrated
that.
to you that
I
it can be
didn't.
done.
I did not ask if you can gather information. I asked you, can you develop a rigorous scientific theory without the scientific method? Again, I'll read my opener here. Scientific theory is a likely explanation of what causes an observable natural phenomenon based on an experiment using the scientific method. The scientific method goes as such: observation, ask a question, what causes Y? Posit that X causes Y. Introduce X, remove X. Repeat, conclusion, develop a scientific theory. Now, I've demonstrated that for your quote theory of evolution, when I ask you what's the observation, you say there's this anatomy we found. It looks like this other anatomy we have. Look at the similarities. I ask you, interesting, what causes the similarities? You say common descent. I ask you, can you introduce common descent and remove it? You say no. I say it's not a scientific theory. You say experiments are not necessary for scientific theory. Let's take it down a notch here. Let's say scurvy is a thing.
Can I address that or not?
No. So
Okay.
so scurvy. So
That's
scurvy
great. No.
is a symptom, right? A set of symptoms. Scurvy.
I
Have you heard of
I
it?
would call it a condition. The symptoms,
Condition.
yeah, sure.
Okay, great. It's a condition. Is it fair in the scientific method, inside of natural science, to ask the question, what causes scurvy?
Yeah, that's fine.
Scurvy.
Could I arbitrate between two hypotheses of what causes scurvy without an experiment?
It wouldn't necessarily have to be a controlled experiment. You could literally just read ship logs and see, wait a minute, those people on that ship, they took like not freeze dried, but like preserved vegetable, like fermented cabbage, fermented foods. Like that was a way to like, because they didn't have refrigerators, so they could get their dose of vitamin C. Nobody knows what vitamin C is back then, but anyways, you could literally just look at the historical record and you could say, hey, wait a minute, these people were, they had that kind of food, and then this other group of people, all they ate were like meat preservatives and crackers and things like that. They got scurvy and then they didn't. That would be supporting evidence. Now, ideally, you would go on to do experiments that help validate.
Hold on. I understand, Peterson. Hold on.
Yep.
What you just said is that's an observation, and that's the moment you're actually forming a hypothesis, right? Right.
Yeah, but I mean, even with that though, it's like that just sounds more like a correlation might not be causation type of deal. So you could still be wrong, even if you're noticing all these ships have this and these ships have that, and this one's getting scurvy and this one doesn't. It could still be again, it could still be wrong. Like even though it might have this thing in it might have these traits. There might be some underlying trait that we're not even observing yet, that we don't even know about, that could be causing the scurvy.
Looks like one ship had oranges and vitamin C and a way to preserve their nutrients, and that ship didn't get scurvy, but this other ship is missing something. That's a question, and I would argue, and I think you would agree, that that's actually where you introduce your hypothesis.
Sure.
Okay, so I'm asking you again, if you have two competing hypotheses, right? Let's say someone else says that's not the case. Is there
Mhm.
any way other than an experiment to actually arbitrate between the two competing hypotheses?
Yes, because hundreds and hundreds and actually thousands of ships have sailed, and you could look at the records of all of them. You're not producing the data yourself. You're not doing the experiment.
That's an
But if
observation.
you say yes, but these are observations that confirm what your hypothesis is. If like this is literally how studying the past works. Now we can study evolution in the present, but and uh like this is a little bit of a tangent, but other scientific theories like the Big Bang, we don't recreate the Big Bang. We do recreate certain conditions to like know some things about the first moments of the Big Bang, but literally all
Dude,
of it is just observations. We did the
that's
math.
just
We
data,
said
dude. Listen,
there should be these
look,
predictable things out there in nature
look.
that we
Can
see,
false
and we
can
found
can
them.
can hold on? Can false assumptions accurately predict phenomenon?
Seems reasonable that that could
Okay,
happen.
okay. If two different models or hypotheses are saying, look, I'm observing the data and you're observing the data, I think this is causing the phenomenon that's predictable. They both have a predictable element to them. One is true and one's false, or maybe neither are true, right? I'm asking you, if someone's looking at data of thousands of ships, I don't care if it's 1,000,000 ships, and it looks correlative that the ships that have a food preservation technology and vitamin C don't get scurvy, and the ones that don't, they do get scurvy. That's an observation. That's data. I'm asking a different question. When we introduce a hypothesis of what causes the phenomenon, is there any other way to arbitrate between two competing hypotheses than an experiment?
Did he just
Your
fall asleep?
answer
I
was, yeah,
already
more
told you.
data. No, you just said
Yeah.
more data. So no,
Yeah.
the answer is no, because I just told you two people could have the same wealth of data and posit different hypotheses about the cause of the phenomenon, and one could be wrong or both can be wrong. The question is, how do you determine in natural science who's got the correct hypotheses other than an experiment?
I literally answered this question for you.
With more data.
What is it that experiments give us? More data. The
Causal, no,
the
I'm
the
not saying,
the
no, hold
data
on.
that is
No, no, no,
produced
stop.
by
This
an
is sneaky. This is
experiment,
sneaky. This
I'm
is sneaky.
answering your question. The data that is produced from the experiment can absolutely exist in other
That's
cases that have
right.
already occurred. So there's
Okay,
no
cool.
meaningful difference. Experiments are
There's
great
no,
because you can
hold on,
control
hold on a second.
things.
I want you all to listen to what he just said. The data post experiment is no different than the data pre experiment.
That's not at all what I said. I said
This
the
is literally
data
what you
that is
said.
yielded by an experiment is in no meaningful way different than the exact same kind of data from the exact same type of scenario you would set up with the experiment, but it's already occurred.
Okay, so here's the thing. If you're The question isn't whether or not you call the results and information you gain from an experiment data. That's not what we're talking about, right? We're talking about whether or not pure data without an experiment can give you a likelihood cause. And I'm saying
Yes.
no, and you're saying yes.
That's because you're wrong. I can explain it to
Oh
you
wow.
I can explain it to you a
Can you
fifth
develop a
time.
theory? Can you develop a look, let's do it again. There's a ship that comes in and they're sick. There's a ship that comes in that's not sick. We look at the contents of the ship. We see the one ship that's not sick has all of this stuff, right? Vitamin C,
Yep.
preservation. The other one doesn't. We make a correlation. We go, this is pure data right here. We can actually work with this data, right? I'm asking a different question. Can you develop a scientific theory of what causes the condition, illness, without doing an experiment?
Yes.
So why does science need experiment then?
Okay, let me try to bridge the divide that we have here. I think how this originally started was you were trying to get me to tell you how could you get data to support it without the experiment. Now, 2 ships come in. We make an observation about this ship has a bunch of scurvy, this doesn't. We look at what kind of foods the one ship had. We look at the kind of foods the other ship had. We build a hypothesis that says it's due to these vegetables and fruits or whatever. We don't have to run an experiment to get data that confirms that, because we could literally just
Really?
watch every single ship that comes in after that point, and we have nothing to do with the way it's set up. Those kinds of things are sometimes called natural experiments. So you can do all of that without setting up, like in a lab or whatever, the conditions for it. Now,
got
what
it.
I
So
would
let's
say
say,
is,
hold on. No, hold
ideally-
on. No, don't filibuster. Don't filibuster.
Well, no, I was actually going to try to agree with you on
this
something.
is okay. Okay, go ahead. I'll let you just good faith. Go ahead.
I will absolutely agree that ideally you would want experiments, like controlled experiments or whatever, because they eliminate a lot of external variables that allow you to laser focus on what you think is happening.
Okay, I'll ask a question. Let's say we didn't know what caused.
Again, I bring up that, like, if that's the case, and yeah, I guess, like, if you can do natural experiments, fine. But then why are people always yelling at other people? No, no, no. You need to yell. You need to look at the science. You need to look at the data. You need to look at the scientists and stuff. Like, why are they always appealing to like an authority? Then, if we could just notice these natural experiments. So if we notice something, say during the COVID times or something, when we say, oh, when we started introducing the jab, and then there were young people, young healthy people that were just dropping dead from heart failure at the young age, like very young ages, and we said, well, that must be due to the jab. I mean, again, we could be wrong, but why would there be any need to do any work or experiment our data on that if we're just going to see this correlation there and be like, oh, that must be what's causing it? Wouldn't it be best to do the experiment for that reason? Wouldn't it be best to do that?
Scurvy, and there was a grant out with 2 scientists, right? If one scientist was you and one scientist was me, right? And there was a reward for who can develop the scientific theory of what causes scurvy, would you go ahead and present just a correlative argument of the data between ships, what they have and what they don't have, and one clearly correlates to the sickness and one doesn't? Or I do an experiment introducing oranges, introducing and removing oranges and food preservation technology, and I repeat that over and over again. Who's going to get the second grant, me or you?
I don't know.
I am. Why? Because I developed a scientific theory using an experiment, and you didn't develop a scientific theory, and you just merely made a correlative assumption. The difference between a correlative assumption, or let's call it a hypothesis, and another hypothesis is the only arbiter for who's correct in their hypothesis is an experiment.
Jimbob, the problem there is you and I are going to have the same data. It's just that you obtained your data in a different way. I'm going to have data that says if they eat fruits and vegetables, they don't get scurvy, and so will you.
Yeah, but his would actually be proven correct. Yours would have still just been kind of some correlation theory, where Jimbob would have actually had it proven correct. Because even though if you would have had the same data, like, you could have still had your theory, like, well, it's because this ship had the fruits and vegetables. And Jimbob could have done the experiment and came out with it and said, oh, actually, it wasn't the vegetables. It was actually, uh, I don't know, something else, some kind of different factor in there. So even though all it's doing is just, he would have just been confirming your data, but that's about it. But there is a very good chance your data could have been wrong.
Oh, you didn't. You look, the same data that's happening. For instance, let's say, I mean, I couldn't think of a more simple example than this, but I'm going to have to try to think of an even simpler causal example. Let's say poison. Okay, let's say someone's poisoned, and we don't know what caused it. What's the poison, right? You say, well, there's a bunch of poison in this room that's kind of toxic, so it's probably that caused it. And I go, well, there's a variation of poisons here that may have caused it. and you go, yeah, there might be a variation of poisons that cause the death of this person consuming it. You're saying to develop a scientific theory, you don't actually need to introduce the poisons and test which one causes the kind of condition or death. You can just assume, because there's poisons around, that your scientific theory is pure data. There's poisons, and maybe he ingested poisons, right? That's all you're saying, right? We have access to the same data. The problem with your pseudoscience is that the only way to develop a scientific theory, right? Let's look, I'll make it simpler. I choose one poison and you choose another. They're both in the room, right? Peterson goes with this one and I go with this one. I say, oh shit, Peterson, we have competing hypotheses. How are we going to develop a scientific theory of which of the poisons killed this person, right? Can you imagine the coroners taking Planet Peterson's approach to science? Can you imagine that, what that would look like? They don't need to do a scientific experiment to investigate what causes.
In the 1800s. Like literally what you're talking about, Jon Snow in London in the 1800s did this. He was noticing cholera outbreaks, and what he did was he mapped all the city's wells, and then he mapped where like human waste was being dumped, and then he was able to conclude, or he thought that it was caused by the human waste, and then he mapped out the locations of all the wells in London, and then the locations of where the human waste was being dumped, and they found, look, the cholera outbreaks are happening in these specific spots.
That's
and
correlative
they're not
data.
happening in these other spots.
That's correlative data. That's
Now,
great and useful.
What you could do,
we agree.
What you could do from that point to advance the theory is say, okay, well, why? What causes cholera?
Yeah,
well, I think that it's not just poop, it's bacteria in the poop.
That's
so you can advance
now
the
we're getting
theory
somewhere.
that way. Yeah.
Well,
but
no,
you're
that's
pretending
not the
that you can't get the same kind of data.
Stop.
Yeah, I stopped.
You just posited the hypothesis. You said advance the theory. No, you don't. You're basically saying you can get a scientific theory without doing comparing and arbitrating between the two hypotheses. Okay, again, Eric, we're at a party. It's a murder mystery. There's a death. Peterson says, dude, that shrimp has poison in it. And I go, dude, this other thing, there's a poison bottle right here with a.
Anyway, I like seeing
on it,
Peterson
like
get all
pricker, right. And you go, well, I think the shrimp caused the death. And I go, I think this poison caused the death. Right. So the question is, right? The question is, how are we going to arbitrate between your hypothesis, the shrimp caused it, and my hypothesis if we have the same data? There's data. There's shrimp. There's this. There's a dead person. How are we going to arbitrate between the two competing hypotheses?
You could, in real time, have different groups of people eat the shrimp and then collect data that you could collect.
Is that a scientific experiment?
You could collect data in the present.
Is that hold on?
Or you could get the exact same kind of data by looking at events like this that have already occurred.
Dude, what you just said is feed the rest of the group different things. I agree. The two maniacal scientists. Hold on. How else? No. You just said the proper way. Introduce the variable X shrimp and variable X1 poison. Inject people with it, and then that's an experiment.
Yeah.
And then you could tell what happened, right? I'm saying, how would you know, other than doing that, how would you know what caused the death?
Again, you could look at, it's kind of weird to call it a historical record in this case, but we could look at like,
this left, and let's try to keep it all on topic.
This literally does happen. I mean, we're seeing it with outbreaks of avian influenza now, or like with the E. coli outbreak with McDonald's. I mean, we already know that E. coli causes food poisoning, but it's like, well, was it from the lettuce? Or actually it was from the onions for McDonald's. Well, let's track down the onions. Let's track down the farm. Let's track down the distribution. Let's look at the cases of people getting sick around the world. We're not performing an experiment, but we're confirming our idea there nonetheless.
Look.
Experiments are great. It's not the only way.
No, I didn't ask about what you think confirms, because there's two different hypotheses that correlate with the data accurately and accurately predict. If the fact of the matter is two competing hypotheses could both correlatively predict things, we're asking a different question in natural science. You said that E. coli, we know what coli causes this. Well, that's interesting, because that's a claim of natural science, that E. coli causes this type of sickness, right? We wouldn't know that unless we isolated E. coli and introduced it into bodies to see what it caused to do. Now, if there's a whole shit ton of food and it turns out that people are eating all sorts of food and lettuce is one of those foods, we have to determine which food correlates to the sickness. Now, with higher resolution, we look at the lettuce and we go, oh shit, it's nothing about the lettuce. There's actually something on the lettuce. It comes from feces. It's causing this. Let's say we didn't know what E. coli was, but we only knew that lettuce seemed to be the correlative agent here. Well, the only way you can develop a scientific theory in regards to the data you have is to investigate what it is that's actually entering the body, introduce it to the body, remove it from the body with two sample sets, do a scientific experiment, and then see what happens. Is it null? Does it verify your hunch that this little microscopic piece of shit went into someone's stomach and caused all this brutality internally? Yes, you can actually introduce it. That's the problem. To tie it back to evolution, observation is fossils in the past look like fossils in the future, or not even fossils. Looks like something in the past. They have similar traits, right?
Yeah.
I ask, what causes this? Peterson says common descent causes this. I say, interesting. How do you introduce common descent and remove it such you know that it's causal to this phenomenon? He says, you can't do that. That's a concession that you can't introduce and remove common descent.
Well, you can't you can't remove it because you can't change the past. If
you can't take it to the scientific method, then
yes, you can.
New hypothesis, please.
We do evolutionary experiments today.
I didn't ask what you think we do. I'm asking you specifically about this observation. And your dude, listen to me.
The only thing is, I wish Jimbob would have asked him, like, well, what are these experiments necessarily? That's what I would have liked to have known. Like, oh, okay, well, then what kind of experiments do they do then on evolution? Again, like, what kind of method do they use to test? Like, oh, okay, these fossils we found over here seem to be a descendant of these fossils over here, and so let's test it out. And also, how would they know? So let's if I find like a human skeleton bone and then I find I don't know, an elephant bone, bones or something, how would I know that, oh, I can't make an hypothesis, hey, this human bone evolved from these elephant bones over here? Like, how would you know not to make that hypothesis, or even how would you know to make that hypothesis, and how would you test it either way? Like, do you understand what I'm saying? Because evolution proposes that we evolved from something else. So how do we come to that conclusion if we see two different types of skeletal bones?
Observation. Again, there's a thing in the past that looks like a thing in the present. They look similar. The question is, what causes them to look similar? You say a common descent.
Yep.
That's like a category, right? A common descent. This occurs. Okay. So how do you introduce common descent and produce the phenomenon, remove common descent, and see if the phenomenon's still there?
1 minute left.
So really all you're saying is we can't make the
I
course
asked a
of
question.
history.
I
I'm
asked you a
answering
question.
your
This is
question.
cross-examine. Oh, don't tell me what I'm saying. I asked you a direct question. How do you introduce common descent and then remove it to know that it's causing the Y phenomenon?
The idea that because we can't rerun the course of history means that that evolution can't be like a scientific theory.
I didn't ask for a meta. I didn't ask for a
stupid.
meta. I did not ask what you think is stupid. I asked you if you're saying in natural science that common descent causes the Y phenomenon. I ask you a scientific question. How do you introduce the independent variable common descent into a situation and remove it so you know that it's causing the phenomenon of similarities? Just say you can't answer it and go to a new hypothesis, dude. Bite the bullet.
No, well, we could confirm
No?
it in
You're gonna
different
double down?
ways. We could test the genetics of archosaurs
Time is
and
up.
birds today,
You want
and
to
then we
finish?
could. Yeah, I'm addressing this thing here. So we could confirm it in the present by testing the genetics of archosaurs living today and birds living today, because that is the data that would be predicted by common descent, and then we find it. So, anyways, we're out of time, but.
So my question is, why is it just a theory then? Like, if we're doing these experiments today, how come it hasn't been proven yet? How come it's just a theory? And so Jim Bob is trying to stick to the scientific method. See, what's funny is that Jim Bob is actually kind of switching things around a little bit. He's trying to turn it on them, because it's like whenever we'll come on here and we argue for God and the existence of God and such, they're always like, "Well, prove it then. Show me God exists. Show me that picture of God. Have God come down here and wave hi to the camera for us. Have him reveal himself to us, or else he isn't real." And so, well, and then they always appeal to the science. Oh, it's the science. The science is the thing we can trust. That's the arbiter of truth and all these things. Uh, you know, so Jim Bob is actually switching it back to them, and he's saying, listen, with evolution, if evolution true, can you run it through the scientific method? He is now using science as the ultimate, as the arbiter of what is true and what's not. And he's pointing out, like, well, listen, like, you can't, I mean, Peterson claims that they are testing evolution right now. Again, I don't know what kind of tests they do, but how can you possibly, if evolution true, how can you possibly run it through the scientific method? He claims that, well, it's done it where they found fossils, they predicted the evolution of these fossils, and then they later on found fossils that confirmed the prediction. I mean, that's kind of wild. I should look into that, look more into that story, because that's so weird that they make a prediction and then, oh, look, here we happen to have the fossils that fit this prediction. So, wrapped in a nicely wrapped package here. But it's a little weird, it's a little sus, but regardless, that's what he claims. But Jim Bob here is trying to say, yeah, but you can't, it's just more confirmation bias. Like, it's absolutely confirmation bias. You think this is happening, and therefore you think it's true, which is what we get accused of all the time with with the existence of God and whatnot. So that's what I like about Jim Bob, is that he kind of turns things around on these on these lefties here, and these, like, these uh people who use science as an appeal to an authority, because he'll do that. He's done it with the rights thing, where it's like, well, rights don't exist. You can't see it, you can't touch it and stuff. You just have to believe in rights. It's the same thing. He flips it right back on them, just like how they go with us with God. Is like, well, you have to believe, you have to have faith in it. So it's the same thing with rights. You have to have faith in them to exist. you know and so it kind of takes the smugness and the condescension away from these lefties, because it shows that, like, listen, you try to talk down on us and, like, oh, we're the assholes here, but in reality you're just as much of an asshole as we are. And so there's another point I was going to bring up. Anyway, just as much of an asshole as we are. um Shit, what the hell was I going to say? Damn, dude, my fucking brain is just breaking. It's breaking. What was that, 151? Let me put that down real quick. All right. What I'm trying to say is, basically, it's like, they're no better than us. Oh, that's actually what I was going to bring up. They want to talk about, like, how there's natural experiments, right? How it's like you could kind of gather information without having to do the experience. Okay, well, we do that a lot. We'll see a correlation with something. Like, as human beings, just in general, we do that all the time. We see a correlation with something, and then we come to our conclusions. That's how, like, when we argue, when it's like right versus left, and we bring up statistics, the left could bring up something that it's like, well, the statistics say that white people are more likely to, or black people are more likely to get shot by cops than white people. And then, you bring up, like, yeah, well, that's because white people are the majority and whatnot. and then you bring up per capita. But they could use that same sort of stats, which are true, and use it against us. But then we could therefore use the same set of stats and debunk them. And so how do we know what's the arbiter of truth there? You know, how can we know? And so, you know, correlation doesn't cause causation. So Jimbob's trying to make it stick to the scientific method as the ultimate arbiter. Like, once again, you know, turning it around on these lefties, pretty much pointing out how their outlook is flawed as well. Well, just say how their outlook is flawed. What do you guys think about this? So, how do you think? I think Jim Bob did. What do you guys think about Planet Peterson? How he did? Do you believe evolution is true? Do you agree with Peterson or Jim Bob? Sound off in the comment section below. Give that like. Make sure to hit that like button as well. The original video is in the description down below. I got this from Planet Peterson's clip channel, but I'm pretty sure I'll link the full debate if I could find it. I'll link it on there as well if you want to watch the whole thing. And also subscribe to my channel. It'll be very much appreciated. Also follow Made by Jim Bob's channel as well. If you're interested in Planet Peterson, you could follow Planet Peterson's channel as well, I guess. I'll see you guys later. Make sure to listen to Cool Stream Live Mondays through Fridays at 12:30 p.m. Eastern Time.